Hello everyone, this is Brandon Griffin, and I'm here today with the policy speech. Alright, so my policy that I would like to see changed is the Alaska state tax. There's currently no state tax in Alaska. I think that Alaska should institute a state tax. Alright, so let's go into the problem first. Obviously, Alaska's budget is running out of money, or there's a gap in the budget, so they need to make up that money, We're going to get into the cause of that, and then we're going to go to the solution, which is the policy that I'd like to see changed and instituting a state tax. So let's start out with the problem. Alaska's running out of money. Not really running out of money, but so to speak. So in a story done by Nathaniel Hayes for the Alaska Dispatch News Service, this is in 2016, the upcoming budget for 2017 has a $3.2 billion hole in it, meaning they need to fill this money, or they need to fill this gap, and they're not really sure how to do it. So that's part of the problem. There's not enough money in the state to cover what the state needs the budget to do. There's a huge hole in the budget. And so that's the problem. And now we're going to get into the cause, because there's a lot more in the cause than there is just the problem. The cause is simple, and it's oil. Alaska, as many of you probably know, is largely based on the profits from petroleum. And it's running out. So, what can you do? You should have a plan when this happens. Unfortunately, the plan wasn't really supposed to be needed yet, but it's coming up, and they need to change it fast. So in a story in 2008 by James Love, published by the Huffington Post, Mike Bradner, former Speaker of the House of Alaska State Legislator, and his brother Tim Bradner, who used to be a BP, or British Petroleum employee. We're going over the budget back in 2008, and these guys know Alaska well. And one of them's for the House of the State, or the State House of Legislature. Those are the guys that pass the budget. They propose a budget, and then the governor approves it, or the senator. I can't remember if it's the governor or senator, but one of them approves it. So this guy's former Speaker of the House. He's like the top guy in that place that does the budget. And in 2008, he was former. So in 2008, he read the budget, and his brother read the budget, and they said, "This is a disaster waiting to happen." The budget looks good now in 2008, but if the price of oil drops or declines in the rate that they're pumping the oil out of the ground, what their direct quote was that the state's rosy financial situation could turn bleak, which could be a problem with today's bloated state budget. And that's exactly what happened. Another story done by Alaska Dispatch News in May 2016 by Yareth Rosen. It covered the oil companies leaving Alaska. And so there's a couple of big oil companies in Alaska, and some of them are Shell, ConocoPhillips, State Oil, and BP. And in her story, it covers Shell, ConocoPhillips, and State Oil. They're closing down big portions of their oil pumping facilities. So that's kind of like a good sign that you need to start thinking about this. The oil's running out. And then another story done by Alaska Dispatch News, but this time it was done by Jeanette Lee Falsey. This was also in May 2016. British Petroleum, the last of the big four, is putting their headquarters up for sale. That's not good. Their headquarters is here in Alaska, and they're putting it up for sale. All they do is oil. That's their thing. And when the report continues to go on and explain that the motivating factor for BP pulling out is the fact that for 7 straight years, every sequential quarter sequential quarter, they have had less profit than the last quarter for 7 years. And they're finally calling it. They're going to go look for oil elsewhere. So that's the problem. Alaska's running out of oil, and their state budget is hugely dependent on that. And now we're going to get into the solution, now that we know the cause of the problem. So what I would like to see happen is the policy for state tax be reinstated. Now there's a big problem in the problem with that, and that's that state tax in any state that has ever had a state tax taken away, so the state says you don't have to pay state taxes anymore. Any state that's ever done that has never successfully reinstated state tax. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think it needs to happen. And here's why. The plan right now is to cover the funds of the hole in the budget with the permanent fund dividend. Now, if you don't know what the permanent fund dividend is, it's the money that everyone talks about that you get paid to live in Alaska. If you're a state resident, you can sign up and request the permanent fund dividend, and this money is this huge pot of money that the state has saved up from the oil companies. So the oil companies pay the state obviously for drilling the oil, and then the state takes that money, they put it in this huge pot, and then at the end of the year they give back to the community for saying, hey, thank you for letting these oil companies drill on the land. And it's a lot of land. Alaska's huge, so everybody of course wants to accept this. And now everyone's in uproar because the permanent fund dividend is going to be smaller this year than it was last year or the year before that, and it's just going to keep getting smaller because oil's running out. But also a huge benefit to living in the state of Alaska is that you don't have to pay state tax. So if you want to keep the permanent fund dividend, you have to do something. So reinstate state tax. So here's another thing. According to a story done by Kirk Johnson and published by the New York Times, before I said there was a $3.2 billion deficit, but this is more recent than that last post, and now it's a $5.2 billion deficit in the Alaska state budget. And it has to be covered somehow. And others are agreeing that state tax is the answer. In this story, Ronald Duncan, the president and chief executive of GCI. If you don't know what GCI is, it's the cable company. They do cable, they do internet, and they do phone service, home service, like home line service, and they also do cell service here in Alaska. And they're one of the only companies you can use. They're also one of the biggest businesses, according to this story published by the New York Times. They're one of the biggest businesses in Alaska outside of the oil industry. And the CEO, or not CEO, but the president and chief executive is also agreeing something has to happen, and he wants it to be state tax too. So, I mean, if one of the biggest, wealthiest people in the state think that it would be good for state tax to be instated, I mean, how can you go wrong with that? I think that's the answer, and I think that's what needs to happen. Thank you for listening to my speech, and I'll see you next time.